Ethan Carter was an ordinary young man living in the busy streets of Chicago, doing everything he could to make ends meet. At 25, he was no stranger to hard work. By day, he delivered packages for a courier service, racing through the city's traffic. By night, he worked at a small diner, flipping burgers and wiping tables. His life was a constant hustle, and despite his efforts, his bank account always seemed to hover near zero. Ethan dreamed of more. He wanted a life where he didn't have to choose between paying rent and buying groceries. He dreamed of stability, of freedom, and of someday doing something meaningful. But for now, those dreams seemed like stars, beautiful, but out of reach. One rainy evening, Ethan trudged back to his tiny apartment, his jacket soaked and his feet aching from the long day. The city was quiet except for the sound of rain hitting the pavement. He climbed the creaky stairs to his apartment, unlocked the door, and stepped inside. His apartment was nothing special. Just a single room with peeling wallpaper, a small bed, and a second-hand table he'd found on the curb. As Ethan set down his wet bag, something on the floor caught his eye. A white envelope rested just inside the door. It wasn't there when he left that morning, and the fact that it was inside his locked apartment made him pause. His name, Ethan Carter, was written on the front in elegant handwriting. There was no return address, no stamp. Ethan's heart raced. Who would send him a letter? And how did they get it inside his apartment? He picked it up cautiously, turning it over in his hands. The paper was thick, expensive, unlike anything he'd ever seen. Slowly, he opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper with words written in the same elegant handwriting. Asterisk, Dear Ethan, you do not know me, but I know you. You are the rightful heir to an estate worth billions of dollars. However, this inheritance comes with conditions. To claim what is rightfully yours, you must prove yourself worthy. Enclosed are the details of your first task. Should you choose to accept it, you will begin a journey that will change your life forever. If you decline, the fortune will be donated to charity. Your first task awaits you tomorrow at 10 a.m. at the address provided below. Be there, or the opportunity will be lost forever. Asterisk. Sincerely, a friend. Ethan blinked at the letter, his mind racing. Billionaire inheritance? Heir to an estate? Was this some kind of joke? A scam? He flipped the letter over, looking for clues, but there was nothing else. Just a mysterious address. He paced the room, reading the letter over and over. None of it made sense. Why him? He had no family that he knew of, and certainly no billionaires in his lineage. His parents had passed away when he was young, and he'd grown up in foster care. If he had any long-lost relatives, why would they wait until now to reach out? But as crazy as it sounded, something about the letter felt real. The handwriting, the paper, the tone, it didn't feel like a scam. And what did he have to lose? His life wasn't exactly going anywhere. That night, Ethan barely slept. His mind was filled with questions. Who sent the letter? What was the task? Could he really trust this? The next morning, he stood outside the address written in the letter. It was a massive, historic mansion surrounded by tall iron gates and lush gardens. Ethan hesitated. This couldn't be real. He checked the letter again to make sure he had the right place. The gates creaked open, and an older man in a tailored suit walked toward him. Ethan Carter? The man asked, his voice calm and formal. Yes, Ethan replied, swallowing hard. Welcome, the man said, gesturing for him to follow. My name is Mr. Harris. I've been expecting you. Ethan followed Mr. Harris through the gates and into the mansion. The inside was even more impressive than the outside. Grand chandeliers, polished floors, and walls lined with art that looked like it belonged in a museum. Ethan felt out of place, like he'd stepped into another world. Mr. Harris led him to a study, where a fire crackled in the fireplace. Please have a seat, Mr. Harris said, gesturing to a leather chair. Ethan sat down, his palms sweating. Can you tell me what's going on? Who sent me the letter? All in good time, Mr. Harris replied, handing Ethan a folder. Your first task is inside. If you choose to proceed, your journey will begin. If not, you are free to leave now." Ethan opened the folder and read the instructions. The task was simple but strange. He had to live for 1 week without using a single cent of his own money. He would be dropped off in an unfamiliar neighborhood with no phone, no wallet, and no connections. He had to rely on his resourcefulness and the kindness of strangers. Ethan's heart sank. How does this prove anything? The person who left you this inheritance believed that true strength lies not in wealth but in character, Mr. Harris said. This task is designed to test your resilience and ingenuity. If you can complete it, you'll move on to the next phase. Ethan hesitated. This was insane. But something inside him whispered that this was his chance. A chance to change everything. "I'll do it," Ethan said, his voice steady. Mr. Harris smiled. "Good. Then let's begin." Ethan sat in the back seat of a black car as it rolled through the streets of Chicago. Mr. Harris, the man who had delivered the instructions for his first task, sat silently beside him. Ethan's mind was racing. He had no idea where they were going or how this bizarre challenge was supposed to prove he deserved an inheritance he didn't even know existed until yesterday. The car pulled to a stop in a neighborhood Ethan didn't recognize. It wasn't the worst part of the city, but it wasn't anywhere near comfortable either. The buildings were old, the streets cracked, and the people on the sidewalks looked like they were struggling with their own lives. "This is where you begin," Mr. Harris said, handing Ethan a backpack. "Inside, you'll find a notepad and a pen. That's all you'll have for the next 7 days. Remember, you cannot use any of your own money or contact anyone you know. Survive by using your resourcefulness and interacting with others. We'll be watching." Ethan hesitated as he stepped out of the car, gripping the backpack tightly. Before he could ask any more questions, the car sped off, leaving him alone on the sidewalk. He looked around, feeling completely out of place. "All right, Ethan," he muttered to himself. "Time to figure this out." His stomach growled, reminding him that he hadn't eaten since last night. Food was his first priority. He walked down the street, scanning for any opportunities. He passed by a diner and saw a sign in the window. "Dishwasher needed. Apply inside." Ethan hesitated. He wasn't supposed to work for money, but maybe he could trade his labor for food. He stepped inside and approached the older woman behind the counter. "Excuse me," Ethan said nervously. "I saw the sign in the window. I was wondering if I could help out in exchange for a meal." The woman looked him over, skeptical. "You got any experience?" "Not exactly," Ethan admitted. "But I'm a fast learner, and I really need a meal." She sighed but eventually handed him an apron. "Fine. You wash the dishes, and I'll get you a plate. But don't break anything, you hear?" Ethan smiled, grateful. "Thank you. I won't." As he scrubbed dishes in the back of the diner, he couldn't help but feel a mix of embarrassment and determination. He wasn't used to asking for help, but this was about survival and proving he was capable. Over the next few days, Ethan found himself doing things he'd never imagined. He slept on park benches and under bridges, made conversation with strangers to get tips on where to find free meals, and even helped a street performer set up in exchange for a few leftover sandwiches. Each day was a test of his creativity and grit. But something strange started happening. Everywhere he went, he felt like he was being watched. It wasn't obvious, just a shadow here, a parked car there. At first, he thought he was imagining it, but the feeling wouldn't go away. Were Mr. Harris and his people keeping tabs on him? Or was there something more to this? On the 5th day, Ethan encountered a turning point. He was sitting on the curb, exhausted and hungry, when a man in a tattered coat approached him. "You look like you're having a rough time," the man said, sitting down beside him. "You could say that," Ethan replied, forcing a weak smile. The man reached into his pocket and handed Ethan a small, folded note. "Take this. It might help you." Before Ethan could ask what it was, the man disappeared into the crowd. Ethan unfolded the note and read the words. "Not everything is as it seems. Trust your instincts. Ethan's heart raced. Who was that man? And how did he know about Ethan's situation? The next day, Ethan found himself at a community center where a group of volunteers was handing out free meals. He sat down to eat, grateful for the kindness of strangers, when he overheard two men talking at the next table. "Did you hear about that billionaire who died last year? Left his entire fortune to a mystery heir," one man said. "Yeah, but they're making the heir jump through hoops to get it," the other replied. "Crazy, huh? Makes you wonder what kind of test they're putting him through." Ethan froze. They had to be talking about him, or at least the strange situation he was caught up in. But how did these men know about it? Later that evening, as Ethan was walking back to the alley where he planned to sleep, he spotted the man in the tattered coat again. This time, he was standing under a street lamp, waiting. "Hey!" Ethan called out, running toward him. "Who are you? How do you know about me?" The man smiled faintly. "Let's just say I know more than you think. Your journey isn't just about surviving. It's about discovering the truth. You're closer than you realize. But you need to keep your eyes open." "Closer to what?" Ethan demanded, frustrated. The man didn't answer. Instead, he handed Ethan another note and walked away. Ethan unfolded it to find a single line of text. "The next test begins when you ask the right question." Ethan stared at the note, confused but determined. What question was he supposed to ask? And who was behind all of this? As the week came to an end, Ethan felt like he had more questions than answers. But one thing was clear. This wasn't just about money. There was a deeper mystery at play, and Ethan was determined to uncover it.